Elena Carter was a woman people both admired and feared. At 39, she was the youngest female CEO in New York's finance sector. Her face graced magazines, her quotes filled business blogs, and her signature alone could shift stock prices. To the outside world, she was unstoppable. But every night, when the glass walls of her penthouse darkened against the city's skyline, Elena fought a private battle. She hadn't slept through the night in 20 years. It started in college. The late-night study sessions, the pressure to excel, the racing mind that never slowed down. Over time, sleep became a stranger. Doctors prescribed pills, therapists offered breathing exercises, friends swore by herbal teas. Nothing worked. Every morning, she put on flawless makeup to hide the shadows under her eyes, a designer suit to armor herself, and an iron will to carry her forward. But she was tired, bone tired, and no one knew. One winter night, after yet another failed attempt to sleep, Elena stepped onto her balcony. The city was buzzing far below, but in her neighborhood, a quieter pocket near Central Park, the streets were hushed. She hugged her silk robe tighter around herself, staring into the silence. That's when she heard it. Soft, tentative notes, floating upward through the crisp night air. A piano. The melody was unlike anything she'd heard in years. Not polished, not professional, but raw and heartfelt. Each note carried warmth, like a conversation without words. For reasons she couldn't explain, Elena leaned against the railing and listened. Her heart slowed, her breathing deepened. For the first time in 2 decades, Elena fell asleep on that balcony, wrapped in nothing but music. The next morning, she almost convinced herself it was a dream. But the following night, the piano returned. And the next, curiosity gnawed at her. Who was playing at this hour? After a week of listening, Elena followed the sound. It led her to a modest brownstone across the street. Through a second-floor window, she saw a man at an upright piano, his fingers moving clumsily yet lovingly across the keys. Beside him sat a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, resting her head against his shoulder, half asleep. Elena stood frozen on the sidewalk. A single dad. Something stirred inside her, a pang of recognition, perhaps, at the tenderness in the scene. She didn't knock, she didn't introduce herself. Instead, she walked back to her penthouse, carrying the image with her. That night, the music lulled her into another fragile sleep. Days turned into weeks. The piano became her secret cure. On nights when insomnia gripped her hardest, she'd wait for those familiar notes. Sometimes the melodies were halting, sometimes surprisingly graceful, but always human. Then one night, the music stopped. Elena tossed and turned until dawn, her frustration boiling into panic. By morning, she decided she couldn't go another night without answers. The next evening, Elena stood outside the brownstone, rehearsing what she might say. She raised her hand to knock but froze as the door opened on its own. The man stood there, tall but tired-looking, wearing a plain sweatshirt. His dark hair was messy, his hands ink-stained, maybe from work. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Can I help you?" he asked, cautious. Elena almost laughed at herself. What was she supposed to say? "Hi, I'm your neighbor, the CEO of a billion-dollar company, and I've been eavesdropping on your midnight piano sessions because they're the only thing that helps me sleep." Instead, she blurted, "I heard your music." The man blinked. "Oh," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sorry if it was too loud. My daughter likes, well, it helps her fall asleep." Something clicked inside Elena. "It helps me sleep too," she admitted, her voice lower now. His name was Daniel, a freelance illustrator, widowed 3 years ago. His daughter, Sophie, was shy but bright-eyed, with a stuffed bunny she carried everywhere. They invited Elena inside. The apartment was small and worn, nothing like her penthouse. Yet it felt warm, lived in, alive. Daniel explained that he'd never really learned piano properly. He just picked out melodies by ear, trying to soothe Sophie's restless nights. Sometimes she had nightmares, missing her mom. Elena swallowed hard. "So do I," she murmured, almost to herself. Daniel looked at her, really looked. Not as the untouchable CEO from magazines, but as a woman with dark circles beneath her eyes and a heart heavy with unspoken things. That night, Daniel played again, this time for 2 listeners. Elena sat quietly on the couch, her eyes fluttering closed as the notes filled the room. For the first time in 20 years, she slept for 6 uninterrupted hours. Weeks passed. Elena found herself drawn back to the brownstone, again and again. She brought Sophie small gifts, a box of crayons, a book about brave girls, a cupcake from the bakery near her office. In return, Sophie drew pictures of Elena with a crown on her head, declaring her queen neighbor. Daniel teased her about it, but there was a softness in his eyes whenever he looked at Elena. One evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep, Elena lingered. Daniel poured her tea. They sat in the quiet glow of the lamp, the piano resting silently between them. "You look different," Daniel said softly. "How so?" "Less tired, less guarded." Elena smiled faintly. "Maybe because I'm finally sleeping. Because of a guy who can barely play piano," he teased. "Because of kindness," she corrected. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Elena felt the armor she'd carried for decades begin to crack. But life wasn't a fairy tale. Elena's world was ruthless. Investors, board meetings, headlines. The press caught wind of her visits to the brownstone. Powerhouse CEO seen in Brooklyn walk up, the tabloids sneered. At the office, whispers spread. Had she lost her edge? One particularly brutal board meeting ended with an older colleague snapping, "You're distracted, Elena. This, whatever it is, you can't afford it." That night, Elena sat on her penthouse balcony, staring across at the brownstone. Her chest ached. Could she risk everything she'd built for a man who played piano badly and a little girl who thought she was a queen? Then she remembered Sophie's sleepy smile, Daniel's quiet laughter, the peace she'd found after years of torment. And she realized, what good was success if she was too exhausted to live it? The next evening, Elena showed up at the brownstone with no makeup, no designer suit, just herself. Daniel looked surprised but didn't comment. She sat beside him at the piano. "I don't know how to play," she confessed. He smiled. "That's okay. Neither do I." He guided her fingers onto the keys. Slowly, clumsily, they pressed out a simple tune together. Their laughter filled the small apartment, mingling with the music. And for the first time in 2 decades, Elena felt more than just sleep tugging at her. She felt alive. Their story didn't explode into romance overnight. It unfolded in quiet moments. Cooking spaghetti with Sophie, sketching doodles on napkins, walking through Central Park in the snow. Elena still ran a company, still battled restless nights, but now she had a place, a home, that reminded her of who she was beneath the title. And every night, the piano waited.